Paranoid, but not crazy. The Healthy Paranoid's Guide for Surviving the Fake Society. Part 1. Remember the old quip? It was so cold outside yesterday that the politicians had their hands in their own pockets. That was the good old days. Today, the joke has lost its edge. It no longer feels like a joke. Across much of modern life, politics, business, media, there seems to be no conditions severe enough to stop institutions from reaching into your pockets. There was a time when saying, "Everywhere I turn, people and companies are out to screw me," would raise concerns about paranoia. It reasonably would have suggested a mindset in need of treatment. Today, that same instinct may be closer to rationalism than pathology. We now live in a fake society, a landscape saturated with distortion, manipulation, corruption, and performance masquerading as truth. Fake has blossomed so pervasively that it has become normalized. In this shift, a large degree of suspicion, healthy paranoia, is not only rational, but smart and necessary. The sooner you grasp this new reality, the sooner you will be on a path of sanity and survival as you navigate the treacherous fake society. The fake landscape. From a growing list of 25 dimensions of the fake society, here are 4 for openers. Fake politicians. Consider this. Many Americans struggle to pass the same basic civics test required of immigrants seeking citizenship. As many as 1 in 3 Americans can't, according to a national survey by citizensandscholars.com. Yet we routinely entrust governance to individuals who often demonstrate only a superficial grasp of those very principles. There was a time when voters sought leaders who were more informed, more thoughtful, and more capable than themselves. Few elected Franklin D. Roosevelt with landslide victories for president because he seemed like someone they'd be comfortable chatting with at a backyard barbecue. They supported him because he embodied competence and leadership. Today, the trend appears to have reversed. Many voters gravitate toward figures who mirror their own frustrations, biases, and informational blind spots. In this climate, beliefs are frequently treated as equivalent to facts, especially when reinforced by echo chambers on social media. It's striking that more than 2 millennia after Greek philosopher Aristotle articulated the foundations of logic and reasoning, those principles are rarely applied, revealing that they remain widely unknown. Fake leaders, constituency careerists. The term fake leaders applies not only to an increasing number of political figures, but also to leaders across various fields who rise not through educational or professional achievement, but through what can be called constituency careerism. These individuals discover early that they possess charisma, a talent for attracting attention, followers, and loyalty. Instead of developing real expertise or making meaningful contributions in traditional arenas, they focus on building audiences that finance their comfortable, sometimes extravagant, constituency careers. Their stances are not grounded in principles, but shaped by whatever resonates most powerfully with their supporters. As their base grows, so does the incentive to amplify outrage, oversimplify complex issues, and adopt increasingly extreme positions. Over time, some transform from mere influencers into de facto cult leaders, eventually stepping into political candidacies and gurus in other sectors such as finance, life coaching, spirituality, and more. Their defining trait is adaptability, not to truth, but to demands of their audience. Like chameleons, they constantly shift positions to keep the applause and loyalty coming. The healthy paranoid treats all politicians and influencers with skepticism, but is especially suspicious of constituency careerists whose beliefs are not convictions, but commodities to be sold in exchange for power, prestige, and profit. Fake facts. Perhaps the most insidious feature of the fake society is the normalization of lying. One mechanism at work resembles what psychologists call implosion, a process in which repeated exposure to a stimulus reduces emotional response. Originally used to treat phobias, it has an unintentional parallel in public discourse. When people are flooded with falsehoods, they become desensitized. The result is not outrage, but exhaustion, often followed by capitulation. There was a time when getting caught in a lie carried consequences. Politicians apologized and still might pay with their careers. Today, falsehoods are often met with indifference or even admiration for their boldness. For their devoted supporters, the response has shifted from, "Is it true?" to, "Does it serve my side?" In that environment, truth becomes negotiable, and reality itself begins to erode. Lying is now so commonplace that in recent political debates, moderators or overseers have not bothered to fact-check. If they did real-time fact-checks and confronted the speakers, many debates would resemble sketches from Saturday Night Live rather than serious civic discourse. If lying was an Olympic sport, some American political figures and influencers would be perennial gold medalists boasting that their victories proved they made America great again. In view of its growing popularity, perhaps the Olympic Committee should consider including the sport of lying in a new event, jumping to conclusions. Fake American experiment. Since its inception, our republic and its foundational principles set in the Constitution have been called the Great American Experiment. If they are indeed an experiment, why have they so often been treated as settled conclusions, as though they were immutable truths like the Ten Commandments written by God and delivered to the people engraved in stone? In recent years, many of those principles have been violated, while others have come under increasing assault. This has prompted the disturbing question, will the great American experiment survive? Perhaps we should also ask an additional question. Should we go back to the drawing board? The Founding Fathers themselves did not believe that the principles embodied in the Constitution were guaranteed to endure exactly as written or intended. The political divisions and bitter contentious confrontations from the beginning punctuated that concern. They understood that the survival of the Republic would depend upon the character, wisdom, goodwill, and vigilance of future generations. At the conclusion of the Constitutional Convention, an observer asked Benjamin Franklin what kind of government had been created. Franklin famously replied, quote, "A republic, if you can keep it," end quote. His warning was echoed nearly 2 centuries later by British historian Arnold J. Toynbee, who observed, quote, 19 of the world's 21 significant civilizations disappeared from the face of the earth, not from assault by outside forces, but from deterioration within the society itself." End quote. Thomas Jefferson expressed a similar concern in his first inaugural address when speaking of the principles established in the Constitution. Quote, "The wisdom of our sages and blood of our heroes have been devoted to their attainment. They should be the creed of our political faith, the text of civil instruction, the touchstone by which to try the services of those we trust. And should we wander from them in a moment of error or of alarm, let us hasten to retrace our steps and to regain the road which alone leads to peace, liberty, and safety." End quote. Jefferson's words remind us that the Constitution and the principles upon which it rests were never intended to preserve themselves. The success of the American experiment depends not only on the wisdom of its founders, but on the willingness of each generation to understand, defend, and when necessary, thoughtfully reassess the institutions entrusted to its care. A revealing comparison to the American experiment is a clinical drug trial which exemplifies the true meaning of an experiment. Unlike the American experiment, a drug trial begins with a question, not an answer. Will this drug work as intended? The purpose of the experiment is to test assumptions and evaluate results. If during the course of the trial patients begin to die or suffer severe adverse reactions, the experiment is halted. Researchers do not simply lament the outcome and press forward. They stop, reassess their assumptions, identify the causes of failure, and return to the drawing board. In contrast, when the American experiment reveals significant cracks in its foundations, growing threats to its institutions, or repeated failures in practice, the response is often limited to expressions of concern, warnings, and political rhetoric. Yet the experiment continues unchanged, even as the evidence of dysfunction accumulates and the damage escalates. If we truly regard our republic as an experiment, then we should be willing to do what every responsible scientist does when confronted with troubling results. Honestly examine the evidence, question our assumptions, and make whatever corrections are necessary before the experiment fails altogether. The healthy paranoid recognizes that the greatest threat to the Constitution do not always come from those who openly oppose it. They can also come from those who worship it as though it were carved in stone, while refusing to defend its principles in practice. Such reverence is suspiciously camouflage for indifference, or worse, a cover for efforts to undermine and ultimately shatter the very system they claim to protect. Thanks for listening. I'm Bernard Starr.